all of modern textual criticism, and by that I mean the last 230 years or
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
since Griesbach, is based and predicated on the linchpin that scribes took it upon themselves to alter the text,
Hmm.
whereas all the evidence says no, they didn't. And if that linchpin is wrong, the whole modern edifice collapses.
Hey, YouTube, it's Pastor Dwayne here. I am back. I have donned the purple shirt, and I have with me my guest today, John Torres, and he is a majority text guy. So, John, why don't you go ahead and say hello?
Good morning, folks. Glad to be here.
Good, good. So let's start this off. We want to know where you're coming from. So, can you tell us what you think is the best way to get back to the original text of the Greek New Testament?
All right, I'll give you an answer that you probably won't hear from a lot of textual critics, if any. I would go with probability analysis. Yeah, my undergraduate work was in chemical engineering, so I'm
Okay.
into scientific data crunching. When you look at, and we might get into this later, but when you go through all the said and done, the idea that scribes altered the text doesn't fit in with the facts. And mistakes were random, and so you have a large number of random data, statistically significant amounts. Then, if you're an engineer, scientist, you have to apply scientific data handling to it. And there's textual critics do like to say that textual criticism is an art and a science, so you
Mhm.
you can't avoid that. So I would use the probability analysis through which I can show that whatever reading is in the large majority of manuscripts is the original.
Right.
When you do that, you do pretty much come up with the Byzantine text. I don't think that there's going to be a lot of differences, if any, for that matter.
Yeah, yeah. So probability analysis, that's an interesting one. I haven't heard that specific phrase before, but that's kind of what text criticism is in a nutshell, right? Because we don't have the originals, and so we don't have exact certainty on a number of things, and so we use probabilities to determine which way goes where. So, from a modern eclectic perspective, again, I'm a Byzantine priorist, but from a modern eclectic perspective, you could argue that also is a form of probability analysis. It's just the underlying way of determining those probabilities is different. How would you differ from modern eclecticism?
What they're doing is really not probability. When they say probable, they mean in a colloquial sense, not in a
Mhm.
mathematical sense.
Right.
Mathematically, probabilities are actual numbers. You have to take a coin, you flip it. What are the chances of it coming up heads is one and two because two possible outcomes, only one desired. One and two, you flip a die, and the chance of coming up with a three is one in six. Six possible outcomes, one favorable. That's actual mathematical probability. What the eclectics do is they gauge probability not on any kind of objective standard, but on like we have our rules, we have our canons, and we're going to pull off the top of our heads
Hmm.
what we think is more likely. Mathematically, that's meaningless. So it's
Right.
two totally different things.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. I can see that. So then, when you use the New Testament for your own studies, um, what translation do you use? Do you use the Textus Receptus?
Well, I use the New King James Version,
Yeah.
which is based on the Textus Receptus, but I do check the little center column notes to see
Okay.
where there are differences from the majority text.
Okay. And the Hodges Farstad majority text, like you're okay with that? Is that kind of more closely aligned with your position?
I'm fine with Hodges Farstad. I'm fine with Robinson Pierpont. I tend to prefer Hodges Farstad, except in the Pericope Adulterae and the
Okay.
Revelation, where they try to go with schematics. I also use you might have heard of this one, the Pickering's Family
Yep.
35.
Yep.
I like that one simply because he seems to flag every difference and shows the percentages. So you can go through that. And on the rare occasions where the reading he's chosen is not the majority, then I can decide whether to replace it in my
Okay.
mind.
So that's interesting. So you would go with M7 for the Pericope Adulterate, or do you do away with all of that entirely when you're thinking about which PA you're working with?
Again, majority, whatever is in the majority of the manuscripts.
Okay, interesting.
And there's like
Interesting.
1,400 plus manuscripts of John that have it in there. So you got
Yeah,
plenty
yeah.
to work with.
It's very big. There's tons to work with. It's like Mark 16, 9 through 20, right? That's the other one, which is to me kind of silly that we question it, but There's a couple of really old ones that don't have it, right? Vaticanus, Sinaiticus, a few old Latin, but that's getting beside the point here. So where do you stand with regards to inerrancy? In fact, I think I watched an interview with you with another gentleman about a year ago, where you had flagged inerrancy as one of those big issues that kind of drew you away from modern eclecticism. Can you elaborate on that?
Where I stand or how it drew me away.
How about both? Like where
Okay,
you stand, and then how that drew you away.
where I stand, absolute inerrancy, and by
Yeah.
that I mean real inerrancy, no errors, no errors of
Mhm.
fact, no errors of science, no errors of history. If the Bible says this happened, this happened. None of these games like say Michael Akona's flexible inerrancy, where inerrancy
Mm.
really means you can have a lot errors in there anyway.
Right.
So no, absolute inerrancy. This is why I see textual criticism as such an important and underserviced area in apologetics.
Mhm.
From my studies, I've focused on three areas that have been used since the 18th century, basically, and even early in the 17th century, some of it to attack the credibility of the Bible. There's, of course, historical criticism, Darwinism, and
Mm.
textual criticism. And the one that tends to fly under the radar is textual criticism because people think it's like a neutral scholarly field, and it really isn't.
Right.
The all of modern textual criticism, and by that I mean the last 230 years or
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
since Griesbach, is based and predicated on the linchpin that scribes took it upon themselves to alter the text,
Mhm.
whereas all the evidence says no, they didn't. And if that linchpin is wrong, the whole modern edifice collapses. But from the linchpin, Griesbach came up with these canons, and the canons are designed to put errors into the Bible. Because these are
Right.
like the more difficult reading is to be preferred, and any reading that variant that gives you an error is by definition
Right.
the more difficult. And so you end up with errors in the text. And why this is so dangerous, if you compare it to, say, creation evolution, really big issue, a
Mhm.
lot of ministries dealing with it and telling, so many young people fall away and we got to focus on that. Creation evolution, like these others, is people from the outside saying, look, your Bible doesn't agree with our
Mhm.
facts.
Right.
Now, they're wrong about that, but that's what they will say. So you can say, I'm going to go with the Bible, not with your facts. But textual criticism is not an external thing against the Bible. Textual criticism puts the mistakes into the Bible
Mm.
itself. So inerrancy
Right.
is one example, Mark chapter 1, verse 2.
Yeah.
As it is written in the prophets, behold, I send my messenger before your face, will prepare your way before you, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make his path straight. Now that's how it reads in almost every manuscript.
Yeah.
The excuse me, in a few Alexandrian ones, it says, as it is written in Isaiah the prophet.
Mhm.
That goes in the critical text, therefore it goes into the NIV, the NASB, the ESV, every modern translation, and it's an error because that,
Right.
that quote there, the first part is from Malachi 3:1, not from Isaiah. So that's an
Right.
error. And then you spend all kinds of, spill a lot of ink trying to make up justifications for that, which are all bogus. The
Yeah. I
fact is
think. I
there.
think I was gonna say. I think there's another example too in the genealogies in Matthew where it's Asa instead of Asaph,
Yeah.
which makes a difference in regards to who's in the genealogy. So, and of
Yeah.
course, like you pointed out, what is the canon that the harder reading is to be preferred? When you read between the lines, what it basically says is that if it's a mistake, then it's got a high probability of being original, according to the modern eclectic.
Yeah. It's the starting point. A lot of, I think, evangelical textual critics don't even realize it. But I will tell you this one interesting event related to that. I was having a public debate on textual criticism with
Mhm.
Dr. Tony Costa.
Yep.
As we're going back and forth, I don't know if you've seen that. It's
Actually, that
online.
was my first exposure to who you are.
Uh,
I saw that debate and I was like, "Oh, I need to get him on the channel." It took a little while. It took about 2 years before I'd actually reached out to you. But yeah.
so in the latter part of the debate, he suddenly starts asking about rabbits chewing the cud
Mm,
and the whale swallowing Jonah.
mm,
He's just saying, here's a problem because rabbits don't chew the cud. And a whale is not a great fish as Job in the Hebrew has it. And so I explained why these are not errors.
Hmm.
But I was wondering, like, why? This is a textual criticism
Yeah,
debate.
yeah.
Why are you bringing these up? And but still, he brought it up. It's public. I had to answer, and I did. And then, to my surprise, after I answered, he said, "Why are you trying to give explanations now? Why don't we just accept that they're wrong?" And later, I thought about it, and I understood what's going on. One of my arguments against the eclectic text is it puts errors into the Bible.
Hmm.
And the only explanation I could think of why he brought these up is to say, basically, look, there are errors in the Bible anyway, so it doesn't matter.
All
It
right.
destroys inerrancy, no question about it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So you're inerrancy, you're full inerrancy, none of this half stuff. And
Yes.
then you are also in a place where you think the modern eclectic method does damage to inerrancy. I think you're probably right there. I think we would agree with that. Why don't you give us three reasons why you reject the modern eclectic ideology and go for something like the majority? What are, I think we went through one of them, but why don't you elaborate some more?
Yeah. Yeah, that actually is one of them. I have
Yeah.
four reasons, but since
Yeah.
we already did
Sure.
the destruction of inerrancy, I'll give you the other three. The first is that it doesn't accord with the facts. It never has. Uh, as I said, all of modern textual criticism is based on Griesbach's canons, which he published in
Hmm.
1796. It hasn't changed to this
Okay.
day. Like you read any one of those commentaries on variants, and they always will come back to those canons.
Mm.
And Griesbach was a rationalist. I
Mm.
mentioned this in the debate as well, and
Yeah.
Dr. Costa was, oh, that's like an argumentum ad hominem. I said, no, the point is it's a particular worldview, and the worldview is all true knowledge only comes from the rational cogitation of the brain. It
Right.
eschews empiricism. You don't need to check in the real world to see whether the idea is correct. So Griesbach cooked up these ideas because they seemed good to him.
Right.
And he never checked it against real evidence. They were just accepted. And the subsequent work that was done, and there wasn't anything until like the 20th century. I said the first one I know of was somewhere in 1938,
Mm.
when scholars began to actually study scribal habits to see whether the canons accorded with reality. Every study found the opposite. Griesbach, for example, starts with the shorter reading is to be preferred because
Right.
scribes were much more likely to add than to remove, whereas every study found that the most common error was accidental omission, which meant that the longer one would be better. So
Right.
that was one line of problem with it is that uh, it doesn't match what we find in the actual studies. And then the other one, you look at work by Dr. Michael J. Kruger, for
Mm.
example, on the inscriptional curse,
Right.
where he tracks through the writings of early Christians, Bible, New Testament, and other early Christian writers, where he says a very, very, very strong emphasis on not altering anything.
Hmm.
And a lot of ancient people, not even just Christians, believed in what they call the inscriptional curse, that if you change things, God will get you. And that totally flies against the idea that scribes would just willy-nilly take it upon themselves to alter the text.
Right.
So that's the first reason. I mean, all of its propositions, all of its methodology just do not accord with the facts. And
Okay.
strangely, like when it's pointed out, it doesn't matter. I was looking at Andrew Wilson. He just brought out an
Yeah, that's right.
amazing new
I,
book on this.
I was
But
actually just talking to someone
yeah,
this morning about Wilson's book.
yeah.
And I hear it's like 71 USD. And so in Canada, we're going to spend probably $110 for that.
Well, I think you can get
It's
it for
not cheap, but
91 actually. No,
yeah,
they
yeah,
never
yeah,
are.
yeah, yeah. There you go.
But I was looking at one of his earlier articles
Yeah.
in 2011, and he was commenting on, I think it was Barbara Alland of the Nestle Alland text. Oh yeah, he said commenting on James Royce, who wrote that earlier book
Mm-hmm.
in
Yep.
2008, Scribal Habits. Nor 30 years after Royce's dissertation, and despite subsequent studies corroborating his findings, does there appear to be any movement towards rectifying this problem. Indeed, the 2010 SBL Greek New Testament is an even shorter text than Nestle Aland 27. Barbara Alland argues that not even the canons of criticism should be altered. Quote, in the previous comments, I did not go into the criteria that lead in each particular case to decision about the original reading. since they, of course, have not changed and will not change. So it kind of
Interesting.
implies they're wedded to this methodology, and the
Yeah.
facts are not going to change it. That
Right. Yeah. It sounds like there's not, I don't think there's going to be much that you could say um, to remove the methodology. Like, I mean, CBGM is touted as kind of like a new methodology, but it isn't really a new methodology. It's more like a new set of evidences, if you want to use it that way. I've been trying to get my mind around how CBGM is working. Got a couple books and stuff, but man, it is a slog. Uh, but
yeah.
anyway, yeah, where I was going with that was oh, where was I going with that? I totally lost my train of thought. Happens. Um, I'll just leave that. Um, yeah,
Comment
like
on BBGM though, like as far as I've been able to determine, it's just having a computer program do what people used to do by hand.
yeah,
And so computers can work a lot faster, crunch out more data, but it's still based on the
the
program,
canons.
which
Yeah.
starts with the exact same canons. So it's really just a computerized version of what's always been there.
Yeah, well, one thing's for sure is that it's not this big, this objective method that we can use. Like that's clear. And to be fair, those who use CBDM like Peter Gurry and Wasserman and whoever else, right? They do say this isn't the big, this isn't just the objective way of doing it because you still need to make subjective decisions.
Yeah.
I mean, again, to be fair, he was completely clear in his book about that. So this isn't like this is it, right? And there's still a lot of a lot of controversy surrounding CBGM. Like I talked to a number of people who are in the field, and many of them are like, I don't know, I don't think CBGM is going to be like Elijah Hickson, for example. He's been pretty vocal about not necessarily thinking CBGM is the best. So it's still, but again, like you said, it's built upon those same text critical principles from Griesbach back in the 1700s. So yeah. Anyway, sorry, I'm interrupting here. Yes.
Number three, which is I mentioned before, it totally ignores any kind of scientific data handling.
Mm.
Um, these people are what we used to call artsies in engineering school, which is arts and science, but it's basically anybody who's not an engineer. And they're not trained in any kind of scientific data handling, statistical analysis, any of that. It has the same effect on them as sunlight on a vampire, I think.
Right.
So they get very upset. And so they refuse to use it. But you have to. I mean, this is actual data. It's just random data. We got lots of it. You have to use it, and they don't.
Hmm.
The reason number three, I think it's a short shrift, but it doesn't pay any attention to the actual demonstrable quality of manuscripts,
Okay.
but only to age and then to text type. And the problem with that is like I could make a copy of a document. I could be very careful and meticulous
Hmm.
and be very, very wary about making any kind of mistakes. I can hand it on to somebody else who will then copy mine, and he too will be very, very, very careful. And I could go through like a chain of six copyists, and as long as each one is very careful, it will come out looking like the original, very
Right.
close to it. Whereas another guy at the same time I did my copy could do a copy, and he's very careless, makes a lot of mistakes.
Hmm.
And so my sixth generation copyist will be closer to the original than that first generation copyist, just because of how carefully he wasn't doing it.
Right.
These manuscripts that we're told are the best, um, Codex Sinaiticus, Codex Vaticanus, and the Papyri and so on, like all textual criticism has to be focused on that because these are the earliest and best manuscripts. They're earliest, but they're by no means the
Hmm.
best. Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, and I'm sure you've heard this before, like they're supposed to be the best and closest to the original. And Hermann Hosky in the early 20th century
Hmm.
decided, as a lark, he would compare the two manuscripts, make a summary of all the differences. He thought he'd quickly get through the entire New Testament. There's not going to be that many because they're the best manuscripts. They should be very similar. He ended up filling two large volumes. He got only through the gospel
Mm.
books, and he flagged between the two of them 3,036 differences. And he's not including
Wow.
like spelling mistakes and word
Right.
substitutions. As Wilbur Pickering points out, that means you cannot technically class these two manuscripts even into the same text type.
Yeah.
many differences.
Well, it's interesting because I think this was from Wilson's book when I was chatting with my buddy the other day. He was saying that I think it was him, P75
Hmm.
is no closer to the critical editions than it is to the Byzantine editions. So, I mean, if P75 is one of our flagship manuscripts and it's no closer to the critical text than the Byzantine text, then what are we doing?
But we're also told
Yeah.
though that P75 is like a direct ancestor of Codex Vaticanus. They're
Yeah.
so similar. I know Fee published that article.
Hmm.
But it is true that when they talk about that this is this, that, and the other thing, it's often very misleading. They will say like all the papyri, you'll have textual critics and apologists, Christian scholars saying that you look at the papyri and they're all Alexandrian or Western. None of them is
Hmm.
Byzantine. There's no Byzantine manuscript in the papyri. Now, in 1965, Kurt Aland gave a very important paper at I think it was a Society of Biblical Literature meeting, and a point he made. I can't quote verbatim from my memory, but he was saying that he's always felt guilty about talking about mixed texts and describing the papyri as mixed texts because you can't have mixed texts before the recensions actually exist.
Uh,
He said that, but what you have in the papyri is they're all over the place. They're
right.
not they're not lining up with clear text
They're
types.
not unified. Yeah.
Yes, Comfort says
Yeah.
P66 is not fully Alexandrian, it's not fully Western, it's not fully Byzantine. Scholars are hard pressed to give P66 a fitting label.
Mm.
And there's an interesting where I picked up a PhD dissertation by a fellow called Stutz.
Yep.
And what Stutz did in his work was to study the textual characteristics of the five earliest papyri of Matthew. And P77, P45, P64, P1, and P70, ranging from about the year 150 to the third century. And he compared it to a typical Alexandrian Codex Sinaiticus, a typical Byzantine Codex Basilensis, and then also to the Textus Receptus. And he found four out of the five were actually closer to Codex Basilensis, the Byzantine, and to Textus
Mm.
Receptus than they were to Codex Sinaiticus.
That's interesting.
So if you're going to characterize them as anything, they should be Byzantine. But that's not going to happen because the industry has already decided that nope, Byzantine didn't exist then, so they cannot be Byzantine.
Right. Right. Very interesting. Well, that brings up a interesting talking point here. So, um, the whole discussion surrounding text types generally, right? CBGM doesn't use them at all. And there was this big discussion. In fact, I think there might have been a symposium some time ago, questioning whether or not text types are a thing. Um, I think Elijah Hickson had suggested that they're just very difficult to determine. We had Caldwell's way of doing so. I think it was like 10% difference and 70% agreement or something, but nobody could ever really find a way to see that work out. And then you had Peter Gurry, who's teaching CBGM, just doesn't use them at all. And he's been pretty vocal about that. Now, on the other hand, Maurice Robinson comes around and suggests that we still do have these text types, but he doesn't refer to them as types, but as clusters. And the reason for that is because, well, text types indicate some sort of recensional activity, whereas textual clusters doesn't. So do you think that these four or maybe three, right, Caesarean, we don't know what to do with that. Do you think they're the result of a recension?
No, no. And
No.
in fact, Gurry in that article that I'll probably get to later, where he's introducing the process view, he says that actually textual critics have completely abandoned the idea of text types. So it may still go out in the
Mm,
popular level books, and people are not specialists in the field. But he says that the industry textual criticism does not they've abandoned that, like they've
mm.
abandoned the Lucianic recension.
Right, right.
Now, I could point out in my master's thesis on this, which was in 1996, I said text types are bogus and
Mm,
Lucianic recension is bogus. So it
mm.
looks like the industry has caught up to me on those.
Right.
The point, if you have the original, okay, and you make two copies, and then two copies of each of those, two copies of each of those, eventually, like if a mistake introduced here in this copy will be carried on into later levels and so on. So you will get clusters.
Right.
That's inevitable. It's like looking at a family tree. Certain genetic traits are passed on in different lines. But clusters are just a description of what is. They have
Right.
nothing to do with somebody editing it. They're all just based on
Okay.
the fact that along each chain of transmission, you will have certain random errors creep in that will then be passed on to everything descending from there. In the
Right.
absence of cross correction, which is
Okay.
a confounding factor. But
Right. Right.